Okay, welcome science students to our next kind of intro lesson to some fundamentals for science. This skill we're going to be looking at is formula rearrangement, which I think is fundamental for a whole bunch of different science courses, as it says there. And the thing is, it's really similar to some simple algebra. So we're just going to start by doing some simple algebra that you probably know from previous math. Hopefully it's easy, but we'll just kind of review it. So if you had this 24 is equal to 4x and you have to solve for x, first you have to determine what variable you're solving for. In this case, there's only one, but I am solving for x. That's your first step. Next one is determine what is happening to that variable. In this case, x is being multiplied by 4. All right, good. We found out what's happening to the variable. Next one, do the opposite operation to get the variable by itself in the opposite order of bed mass. That's the confusing one. That's a lot to put in one point. So first, let's start with the opposite operation. Well, it's being multiplied by 4, so the opposite of that will be to divide by 4. Okay, so I'm just going to write that here. We need to divide by 4, but in the opposite order of bed mass. Okay, so bed mass is hopefully a little bit familiar from math, and it meant how you solve something is you go brackets, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. That's for solving an equation, but for rearranging it, we're going to be going backwards in the opposite direction. Okay, so that's important to remember. And it goes addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, then exponents, and then brackets. This time we only have one operation. It's multiplication and division. So there's no addition, subtraction. We're going to start right here with the division, multiplication. So we will divide by 4. I like to write 4 on the bottom here or in the denominator, so we're dividing by 4. Then we know if there's something in the top and the bottom, they cancel it like that because it's times 4 divided by 4. Then whatever I do to that side, I have to do to the other side. So divide by 4 on this side. 24 divided by 4 is 6. And all we have left over here is x. All right, so a little review there. And now we'll do 2 more examples. So say we have 15 minus 4x. First step, find the variable we're solving for. That's going to be x. Step 2, figure out what's happening to it. This one's a little bit trickier, that's why I put it in. It's not x minus 4, it's 4 minus x, which is kind of hard to say what's happening to it. It's actually happening kind of to the 4. It's being subtracted from 4. And I think what students often forget is that negative is tied to the x. Often they see the minus and the 4, they go, well, I'm just going to add 4 and then it cancels. But that's not what's going to happen because the x is negative, but the 4 is positive. So to get rid of that 4, I actually need to minus 4. Now let's just write bed mass. Even though there's not multiple operations, we're still starting with addition subtraction, which is good. So we're going to get that out of the way. There's nothing else to do, but that's good that we're getting that done. Plus 4 minus 4 cancel out. I minus 4, and I get 11 is equal to negative x. Okay, now I have a negative x. I don't really like ending up like that, but how we're just going to flip the negative over the other side is I'm going to times by negative 1 on each side. We get negative 11 is equal to x as our answer. Now, if you don't like having a negative x at the end, there is another way to do it, which I'll show in red here. We have 15 equals to 4 minus x. Say I don't like that negative x. Let's get rid of that right off the start. We're going to put it to the other side by adding x. So I don't like minus x. I'm going to go plus x. Cancels it on that side. Plus x means 15 plus x is equal to 4. And then I don't have to deal with negatives. Then to get x by itself, I say, well, 15 is being added to it. I minus 15 from both sides. X is equal to negative 11, and I get the same answer. So either one of those ways work. Now let's try one with division, which we have here. 8 is equal to 12 over x. Okay, this is hard because x is in the denominator. And kind of like the last one where we had a negative x, it's going to stay like that until we fix it. The last one stayed negative until we switched it. This one's the x is going to stay in the bottom until we take care of that. So kind of like we, in that last example, I got rid of the negative right away. That's how I like to solve these ones. Get x out of the bottom right away. So if you ever see it in the bottom, let's get it out of there. How we're going to do that is we need to cancel it from that side. So if 12 is being divided by x, to cancel that x out or undo that, I'm going to have to times by x. So I'm going to put x in the top. They cancel out and I have x over here. All right, so I just moved x to the other side by multiplying it. Canceled the division here. I have 8x is equal to 12, and this is a much more comfortable formula to solve for. We want to solve for x. How do I get rid of the 8? Well, it's being multiplied. I'm going to divide by 8. 8 over 12, that would be the same as 3 over 2, so that gives us x is equal to 1.5. as our answer. Okay, so just some algebra. Now we're going to take that to applying it to formulas. Okay, so this is nice. Formula rearrangement is the exact same process, except for instead of having numbers, we're going to have other variables. So let's do this example of E is equal to half mv squared. This video is going to be used for Science 10 and Physics 20, so this may be probably a little bit hard for the Science 10s. Your practice questions will be a bit easier. Physics 20, you will have seen this before in Science 10, hopefully, but we're going to rearrange this for V and for M. It's the same process, whether you're in Science 10 or Physics 20, it's just how hard I'm going to make them. Rearrange for V. So I'm going to write E is equal to half mv squared, and we're going to do the same process that we did before. So locate the variable that I want to rearrange for. I'm going to switch to green here. This said solve for V, so I'm going to circle V. I like to do at the start, say what we're solving for. The next step was figure out what is happening to that variable. A lot in this case compared to the other ones. It's being multiplied by a half, multiplied by m, and squared. Okay, three things. So this is where we have to remember, do the opposite order of bed mass. All right, so we're going to start with any addition subtraction. We don't see any there. So that's already done. We're going to go next to division multiplication. Okay, we do see this. The half and the m are both being multiplied to v. So we need to undo both of those. All right, I'm going to start with the m because it's right next to it. So m times v, how do I undo that? I'm going to divide by m, and it's going to cancel. So I'm going to divide both sides by m. I'm going to write what I have so far. E over m is equal to half v squared. All right, so I moved the m over. Next thing I got to move is the half. Now half's a little bit tricky because you could imagine it's timesing by a half or dividing by 2. That is kind of the exact same thing that's happening. So what I like to make this look like is, well, since I see the 2 on the bottom, it kind of looks like it's dividing by 2 or taking half of that v. So how do we do the opposite of dividing by 2? Well, we would times by 2 to cancel that out. If you wanted to divide by a half, that would work as well. But I like timesing by 2 there. It gets rid of it. And I'm going to put 2 over there. All right. So now that I scratch this out, this is actually what we have. 2e over m is equal to v squared. All right. Now one last step, and that's to get rid of this square, which is an exponent. You might not really remember this part from math, but how you undo a square is you take the square root. So that symbol looks like this. I know it's kind of blocked by that other green there. Let me show it in red. It looks like that, square root. So I take the square to that side and it cancels out the square. And I'm going to take the square root of this side. And now we have our equation. 2e over m square root is equal to v. All right, that's definitely one of the harder ones. For the Science 10, that's probably the highest you could be asked to do. That actually will come up in our course. Physics 20, hopefully that one is familiar from before. We will see some a little bit harder than that, so hopefully we can do those at that level. Now let's also try rearranging for the m. It will be a little bit easier than the v, but let's show that one. I'm going to switch back to green here. So start with the original formula. E is equal to half mv squared. Figure out what we're trying to solve for. We're trying to solve for m in this case. What's happening to it? It's being divided by 2 or times by a half, whichever way you want to picture that, and times by a v squared. The reason I brought this one up is the m isn't being squared at all. This only actually has 2 things happening to it, a half and then multiplied by v squared. V squared is like a whole thing that is being multiplied by m. So let's look at bed mass, even though I kind of scratched it out. We do the addition and subtraction first. Don't see any of that, so that's done. Division multiplication, that's kind of both of these. It's being multiplied by v squared and it's being divided by 2 for a half. You can do either one first. They come as a group here, but I'm going to get rid of the half because I think it's easiest. So I'm going to times by 2 to cancel out a half and put a 2 over there. Let's just make this a little cleaner. 2e is equal to mv squared. Okay, now to get rid of that v squared, remember the v squared is being multiplied by m. So how do you undo that? Is you divide by v squared. You don't have to take a square root because remember that m is not being squared. So we divide by v squared, that whole thing. Divide by v squared over here. Those cancel, and that is our final equation. 2e over v squared is equal to m. All right, we're gonna try one more here. It's kind of similar. It's F is equal to mv squared over r. So similar to that last equation, just a little bit different. I would like you to pause the video here, see if you could solve for v and solve for r, and then replay it when I'm going through this process. Okay, hope you tried it. I'm gonna write down the formula here. F is equal to mv squared over r, and we're trying to solve for v. So I'm going to circle v. Okay, what's happening to that? Well, m is timesing by v. V is being divided by r, and it's being squared. So three things, like we saw in the last one, are happening again here. So bed, mess, which one do we do first? Any addition and subtraction? Oh, we're good there. Any division multiplication? Yes, we have times by m and divide by r. So we need to do the opposite of that. So if it's m multiplied by v, what's the opposite? Divide. So we're going to put m down there, cancel it out. Divide m on the other side as well. Now I have v squared divided by r. What's the opposite of dividing by r? Timesing by r. So I'm going to put it up the top there, cancels out, put it up on the top over there as well. So r times f over m is equal to v squared. Hopefully remember the last thing we have to get rid of is the square with a square root. Gets rid of that. I know that's getting messy, but look, all we have left is the v, and we put the square root over there as well. People often ask if they should write it like rf over m, or if they should write it rf over m. Both are actually the same thing, whichever one you want to do. The r is being multiplied by f and divided by m, or it's being multiplied by the f over m. Same thing, so whichever way you want to write that. And the next one here, looking for r, so I'm going to write f is equal to mv squared over r. Now we want to solve for r. And the reason I brought this one up, and you might have had a hard time with it, is because the r, the variable we're trying to solve for, is in the bottom. That's like when we were looking before and x was in the bottom. We're trying to solve for it. So we don't want to keep it in the bottom. We want to get it out of there. So we're going to multiply by r right off the start. So times by r cancels r out. I times it on that side, I have to times it on this side. And my new equation is rf is equal to mv squared. I'm going to write that. mv squared. Now remember, I want to solve just for r, and actually now there's not much by r, just f. So r times f, how do we undo that? We're going to divide by f. So put f on the bottom, it's going to cancel, put f on the bottom, and we're all done. So that looked like a hard one with r on the bottom, but if we move it out of the bottom right away, it actually gets fairly easy. Okay, so next, using your calculator. So you have probably a scientific calculator or a graphing calculator. If you're in math, you probably have a graphing one as well. If you're just taking science courses, it's probably just the scientific one. But there's a couple things on there that I think is going to make your life easier. So I want to go through some of those. How to enter scientific notation, how to use brackets, and how to use the answer button are all, I think, big things that are not that hard to do and will help you a lot in solving questions. So let's start with scientific notation. So just review, scientific notation is when we have to do times 10 to the exponent. So say you had a really big number like 500,000, right? And you didn't want to write that whole number, so you wanted to shorten it because some are like really, really, really long. So how you could shorten that is move the decimal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places and write 5 times 10 to the however many places that it moved, which was 5. And that's scientific notation when you write something like 5 times 10 to the 5. Science 10s, we won't see as much of this. We will see a little bit in the second unit, and I will review how to write things in scientific notation. Physics 20, you will see quite a bit of these, especially in the second unit. We deal with some space questions where masses and distances are really big, so we'll have to get pretty comfortable with this. But anyway, regardless of how to write scientific notation, we're talking about how you put this number into your calculator. That's all we're focusing on right now. So what you're going to do is there's often an EE button, and it puts an E in your calculator when you press it. That's the button on your calculator. Again, there's sometimes a little bit different, but most calculators have an EE button. When you press it, an E comes up on the screen. What the E represents is times 10 to the exponent. So it represents this part right here. Let's put that in red so you can even focus on it more right there. Times 10 to the exponent. So if you were going to enter, let's say 2.5 times 10 to the 6, you're going to go 2.5, E button, which pops up as an E, and then 6. And that's what's going to represent this number in your calculator. So I'm going to just show that real quick. Okay, so I'm in the calculator now, and hopefully you can see, I know I can't really write on this screen, but there's a double E by the comma, and that's actually the same for a lot of graphing calculators. It's got that little double E up in the corner. So up in the corner, you have to press second to get to that. So I'm going to go second, comma, and that gives me an E. All right, some calculators you just press the E, some you have to go second E if it's up in the corner like that. So if I want to write, like we said, that 2.5 times 10 to the 6, I'm going to go 2.5, second E means times 10 to the 6, and then I hit enter, and it shows that number. We can see from the 2, there are 6 digits after that, the 5 and then 5 zeros. All right, so that's how you do scientific notation in your calculator. Okay, so next I want to talk about brackets. So there's quite a few things with brackets. The first one I want to talk about is that your calculator knows a lot of things and can do a lot of operations, but it doesn't always know the numerator and the denominator and where you decide to separate those two. So I'm going to use an example of that first. So if you were solving this in your calculator, we have 2 times 5 divided by 4 times 3, all right? If you're putting that just in your calculator, you might put 2 times 5 divided by 4 times 3. Let's see if we put that in. We have 2 times 5 divided by 4 times 3, and we get an answer of 7.5. But that's actually not correct, because when we look at this equation, it was 2 times 5, that whole number, divided by 4 times 3 divided by that number. And your calculator didn't know to group those together. And we can just do some quick math and say that 2 times 5 is 10 over 4 times 3 is 12. And we shouldn't be getting a number of 7.5 when we go 10 divided by 12. So let's see how we put that in our calculator with brackets to show this. So we're going to put bracket 2 times 5, because that is the numerator, divided by everything in the denominator, which was 4 times 3. That's what we wanted, that whole numerator divided by that whole denominator, and we do get 0.83. So make sure you use brackets to keep the numerator and denominator separate. Next one is use brackets just to be safe if you're doing scientific notation. For example, if you had 2 times 10 to the 4, but then you had to square that, I wouldn't want the calculator to think that just like the 4 was squared, so it's like times 10 to the 16. So I would put brackets around here just to be safe as well if you're working with scientific notation. And also just to note, brackets next to each other means multiply. So I put 4 in brackets and then 3 in brackets, it'll give you 12. Not really that useful for those operations, but say you have to enter this 2 times 10 to the 4 squared and then multiply it by 5.7 times 10 to the 3 squared. Yeah, you just don't have to put the multiply in there. You just put the brackets next and they will multiply. Just a small detail. And lastly, but maybe the most important and the most simple, is your answer button. It can be annoying when you get a really long answer. So maybe you hit equals and it's 12.5463467, and there's all this big number. And then you have to use that again in something. Maybe you're doing like lots of calculations together, and you don't want to enter all those digits in your calculator again. There's a way to simply do it. It's annoying to type that for the next operation, so you just press second and then equals, and it means answer, and it puts your previous answer into the next equation. Let me show you. So let's just make up an equation here. So I have 42.56 divided by 9.742, okay? And I get an answer, and it's a big, long number. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this second button, and right by the minus, it says ands. So I'm gonna press second minus where it says ANS there, right there, and that's gonna be my number. So I could just like plus 2 or times or whatever that is, and that answer means 4.68712, all those digits. So I can prove it there just by pressing equals, and it gives me the same thing. So second negative gives me that answer. So I wanna just add 2 to that. You can see it was the same number, it just put 2 more. So that can be super useful. Also, if you want to put in the same entries you had before, so maybe you did like 4 times 2 plus 3, and then you get your number, and you're like, wait, actually meant to add 4 instead of add 3. Instead of retyping that again, you can go second enter, and then you get your previous entry, and then I can just, okay, I'm gonna switch that to the 4. and then I can get my right answer. So that's useful for operating your calculator. All right, now that's it. I know it was a little bit of a long video, but those are some fundamental skills that I think will help you through the course, whether it's the Science 10 or the Physics 20. Again, the practice questions that you have will be either easier or harder based off the course you're in, but please give those a try in the day after watching this video, where I can give you some help, and I will see you in class.